What's up everybody, welcome back to the channel. And today we're doing part 2 of the Kia Soul. As you can see, we do have a little bit more done to it. I did spray the cylinders down just to keep them from rusting, and we're going to do a honing stone over top of the block just to get all the roughness off right here. And took the motor mount off, the belts for the alternator and water pump, took the pulleys off of the water pump, and disconnected pretty much all the alternator stuff and the alternator bracket. Reason we did this is because I'm going to be replacing the water pump on this, and we need to get the lower cover off for the timing belt anyway. And we do have the head back from the machine shop. They did replace 2 valves. They said they had to surface the head down 10 thousandths, not 10 millimeters, because it's got to be 3/8 of an inch, but 10 thousandths, which is a good bit if you know anything about machining. That's a good bit because you only have like a 2 thousandths tolerance on this right here. But the way we took all this off was the bracket is held on with 2 12s. The alternator, all the bolts are 12 millimeters, even the tensioner bolt and all that stuff. The pulley bolts for the water pump, those are 10 millimeters, and we still have to take the AC belt off, but there's a tensioner down there. We'll have to remove that as well so we can get this cover off. And that's pretty much where we're at right now. And I do have a jack under the engine, and we're going to be lifting and lowering it as needed. So here's everything we took off. Your water pump pulley has 2 pulleys on it. You have a small one and a big one, and the small one goes behind the big one. You have your alternator bracket right here. Like I said, it's just 2 12 millimeters right there, and then here's your solid motor mount right there. And I'll try to get y'all in here so you can see this. There's your tensioner right there on your left. There's the crank pulley. We'll have to take that off, and I don't know what size that is yet, but to take this belt off, what we're going to do is you're going to break this nut loose, and then here's your tensioner, and you'll run that down, and it should loosen it up, and we can take this belt off, and then we can take the tensioner off, which I believe there's either 2 or 3 bolts that hold it to the block. I can't remember, but we'll take the pulley off just to be sure so we can see and get behind it. But let me take this off, and I'll find out what size this crank pulley is right there, and we'll try to bust that loose too. Here's your crank pulley right here. This was a 22 millimeter, and you don't need any kind of like puller to pull it off. If you just work it back and forth a little bit, it'll slide right off, and it is keyed, as you can see right there. Then here's your tensioner for your AC, and be careful because the pulley itself has 2 big washers on it. We're going to clean that up before we put it back on. There's your where your crank was. There's your keyway right there, and we're going to have some 10 millimeters that hold this cover on. As far as I can see, this should be about 5 or 6 of them, and like I said, it's just 10 millimeters. So we're going to go ahead and pull these off, and once we do that, it should be able to pull the off, timing belt rest of the way. See if I can get this out right here. There we go. Alright, see, you can see your keyway sprocket. That should be your timing marker right there, that little white spot. And like I said, let's take this cover off, and we can get the remaining of the timing belt off, and we can go ahead and change the water pump, timing belt, tensioner, idler, whatever's in there. I think the idler is actually on the head, but I'm gonna go ahead and get that off, and once I get that off, I'll show you what it looks like. Here's your timing cover right here, and the hardest bolt to get to, in my opinion, was this one right there. You should have 4 bolts holding it on. These 2 at the top, this one right here kind of next to the top side of where the crank pulley was, and then the one on the very bottom. And it will go around the motor mount. You don't have to pull the motor mount. It looks like you do, but you don't. You also have the water pump out, and this is the original water pump. They do use metal gaskets from the factory as well. here is the new one. So it goes in like this. So you're going to have 5 bolts on there. They're all going to be 12 millimeters, and you're going to have 2 different lengths. You'll have shorter ones, or actually 3 different lengths, sorry. You'll have the shortest one being right here, then you'll have 2 little bit longer ones right there, and then these 2 right here where the alternator bracket goes in, and that helps hold it on as well. And then one of the bolts that goes through the timing cover is right there. But as you can see, we have it all off right there now. There is a dowel that goes in to hold it in, or 2 of them. One right there, and then one right down there. But here's the new one. We're gonna get the gasket and everything. You do have to take the idler off. Forgot to mention that. Here's your idler, and this one right here was getting wore out, as you can hear. But it is a 14 millimeter that holds that on, so, and it just goes straight through the middle. But now we're just going to start cleaning it up. Like I said, I'm gonna take a honing stone to the top of this real quick, clean up what I can just to try to get all the high spots off of it, and we can start putting the head back on. That way we can get everything buttoned up, because I know that the customer is wanting his car back. But let me clean this up, and then we're going to clean the cylinders out as well. And we are going to be doing an oil change, just because all the water that goes in the cylinders probably has gone down into the crankcase, and you always want to do an oil change after a head gasket or any kind of head removal procedures that you're going to have to do. But like I said, let me get all this cleaned up, and then whenever I get ready to torque the head down, I'll bring y'all back, just because I want to show you the torque specs and the sequence on that. Alright, so I wanted to show y'all that I did go over the top of this, and let me find my stone. Here's the stone I used. It does have 2 different grits on it. I went over it first with this little bit heavier grit. I can't remember what grit they are, but I'll look it up and see what it is and give it to y'all. But went over it, sprayed a little bit of stuff on there just to make it a little wet, and I just did kind of a crosshatch pattern over it. And then once I got all the major stuff off of it, I went to the little bit softer or finer grit, and then I went back over it again, and then we wiped down the cylinders. But you can tell from me rotating it that the cylinders got a little bit more dirty. I'm gonna wipe them out one more time. But the next step is to go ahead and put the head gasket on, and we're going to start torquing down the head. That way we can go ahead and line up everything, make sure all the timing marks are good and all that stuff, because I can put the timing belt and everything else back on without having to put that on before the head. I went ahead and put the water pump on just because it would be a little bit easier with the head off. I won't have to reach around it or anything. So if you want to do that, you're more than welcome to put it in any order you want to. You know, whatever's easiest for you, do that. But this is just the way that I'm doing it. Like I said, I went ahead and put the water pump on. I do have to tighten up these 2 alternator bracket bolts, but we got the cylinder wiped out one last time, and then I got the head gasket put on right there. And we did get this kit off of Rock Auto. They're not a sponsor or anything, but that's just what the customer wanted. He said do it with as cheap as he can, but like I said, that's just what the customer wanted. So we have the head gasket on. Let me grab the head, and I'll set y'all up on a tripod, and I'll show y'all how I put this on, and we can get her torqued down. We have the head sat on there, and as you can see, it looks 10 times better than it did. There's not all the buildup it had. They tried their best to get everything they could out, but if you look down in there, still a little bit of stuff caked up. But like I said, it's way better than it was. So here's the new head bolts right here, and if you want to get your washer down in there because it will not go straight, there's a little trick. just set the bolt down in there, let the washer fall, and it should fall right down inside of there. But let me get these ran down to where they're just flush at the moment, and then we will do the torch spec and the torch sequence on here. And I don't want to bore y'all with me just running them down and showing y'all me just tighten them hand tight with every bolt, because that'd get kind of boring. But let me run these down and I'll be right back. Alright, so we have the torch specs, and on the M10 bolts you need to go to 17 foot-pounds on all of them. Then you go to 20 foot-pounds with a 60-degree extra. Then after you do that, you go back over them and do another 60 degrees. And then the M12 bolts, you go to 20, then you do 33 with 60, and then you do an additional 60. So I got this wrench set up at 17 right now. And you just want to go and start in the middle and go in a circular pattern, like work your way from the middle out. Just go in a clockwise circular pattern. Trying to get it where I don't hit the camera. Right. And these are an Allen head or hex head, whatever you want to call them. The smaller ones are 8 millimeters. The larger ones are going to be 10 millimeters. This is the last one. And the M10s come out to be about 55 foot-pounds, and the M12s come out to be about 75 foot-pounds. Alright, next step that I'm going to do is actually try to set the engine at top dead center and put the cams in where they are about where they're supposed to be. And I gotta look up and make sure where the actual timing marks are on this. I haven't looked that up yet, but let me find out where that's at, and then I'll bring y'all back and clean out some of this oil a little bit too. We did order the new timing chain and a new timing chain tensioner right here. Here is the timing chain. It is pretty much a milling part, and it is 1048 is the part number. Here it is. The reason I got a new chain is, one, this one had a lot of mileage, and two, we could not see the links that were colored, because you got to have the colored links on there to show the correct timing orientation. I mean, you could rotate it and count the number of teeth, but I didn't think about doing that until right near the end. And then here is your tensioner right there, held in with two 10 millimeters. It just goes right there, but you put this in after you put the chain and the cams in. Got the part right here. This is an actual Kia Hyundai part right there. Part number is 24410-23770. And like I said, that is a Kia Hyundai part original. So we know that that should be correct one for this car. And it's just, like I say, held in with two 10 millimeters, and there's your pin to pull it. But let me show you the timing marks on the gears. So on the intake side right here, there's this little notch on the top. Now how well y'all can see it right there. That's where one of the black teeth go. And then on this gear, the little one, there is a dot on that gear. I don't know how well see it. The sun's in my eyes, so I can't really tell if y'all can see it really well, but that's it right there. And you put the other black mark on that one. It was a little hard for me to show me putting it in, but I'm going to show you in a minute. I don't have anything torqued down yet, but I did put assembly lube on the exhaust cam and underneath it as well. And that's just like, call it Stalube or something like that. That's the name brand of it. I've used it a lot, and it actually works pretty well. That's it right there. It's like extreme pressure assembly lube. The caps laid down here in order, and they are marked. You can see it says I5 right there. Number 5 is driver's side, number 1 being passenger side, because the front of the engine is right there. Let's go ahead and bring them all up here. That way I'm not bringing y'all back and forth. But I did put assembly lube under the cam and on the cam, and as you can see, there is white lube also on the cam lifters, because the machine shop did preset my valve adjustment on there for me whenever they did this, which is really nice that I have a good machine shop that can do that for me, which any machine shop should be able to, but you know, some of them may give you a hard time. But if you're good with your machine shop, there shouldn't be any issues with that. As you're tightening these down, just go a little bit at a time, because you don't want to overdo it and put too much pressure where there shouldn't be pressure at. Get back here on the back. I'm using a 1/4 inch ratchet too. I can feel the pressure a little bit better than if I was using a 3/8 or 1/2 inch or something like that. So these cam caps, they torque from 10 to 16. I'm going to go to 15 on these, and I'm going to start out in the middle, and then I'm just going to kind of do like head bolts and work my way in a circular motion. So we're going to do all these in the middle first. I just went back over and checked them just to be sure that everything is correct. So I forgot to tell you, these right here torque to 10 foot-pounds, but what I really wanted to show you right here was the timing belt sprocket on the cam, how you line it up. There's a little notch right there. I don't know how well y'all see that. Then there's a hole in the gear. You're supposed to just look through there and make sure they line up, but I'm going to use the pin from the timing chain tensioner and just stick it through just to make sure that it touches. I can see that moving. But let me get the tire off and I'll show y'all how to line up the sprocket on the crank. Inside where the crank goes, see that little white mark? That's your dot for your timing, and then there should be like a little line, like notch right up there that lines up with that. See how it lines up right there? That's where you gotta line it up at, and that's where your timing mark is. Whenever I put the head on, I did make sure the number 1 piston was at top dead center, just to be sure that nothing weird was out or any of that stuff. But that is where your timing marks go. And now what I'm going to do is start putting my tensioner and idler on along with the timing belt. The idler is down on the bottom end of it, and the tensioner actually bolts up about where the head is. It actually bolts onto the head. Yeah, it's right there. It is actually on the head. So the tensioner bolts on the head, the idler bolts onto the engine. And once I get it all on there, I'll show you what the orientation in which it does go on, just so everybody knows. As you can see, I have the timing belt on, and the way we had to do this was, so we put the idler on, and then we put the timing belt on the crank sprocket first, fed it up through, and there is this bracket right here on the motor mount that you'll have to take off. It's like a little 12mm right down there, and it just comes around the threads right there. But you take that off and you can thread the belt around the motor mount. But the way you're going to do this is you're going to wrap it around the crank sprocket first. That's my paper for the timing belt. But you wrap it around the crank sprocket first, and then you pull it tight on the idler side, which is the exhaust side, up and around the crank sprocket, then back down. And you want all the loose part of the belt on the tensioner side, which will be towards the back of the car. Then what you do is you put the tensioner on, and once you do that, you just kind of put it hand tight, because on the front of it, let me find the old one. Here it is. So on the front of it, you got this Allen key, which is a 6mm. And the way you want to do it is you just put the tensioner hand tight. Then you're going to rotate the engine where the cam sprocket rotates 2 teeth down. So what I did is put a flat edge on the top where the valve cover gasket goes, find that tooth, go up 2 teeth, and then I made a mark across either the belt or the gear on the back. Rotate it where 2 teeth down is. Then you can take a 6mm, put tension on the actual tensioner and belt, pull the pin, then you want to torque down the bolt to 20 foot-pounds. Now in the instructions on here, it's going to tell you 40 foot-pounds. Do not do that, because if you do, you will break or strip out the threads in this head. And if you do that, you're going to pretty much hate yourself for that, because there's enough room to get in there to retap it or to put a helicoil, put a insert, whatever you want to put in there. But it's going to be a nightmare trying to make sure that you drill that out correctly and straight, because if you don't get it straight, this tensioner is going to be crooked, and it could also make this belt walk off. So only torque it to 20 foot-pounds. Do not do the 31 to 40 that it recommends, because that right there is way too much. And then the idler pulley torques to 35 foot-pounds. And then I just spun it over about 6 or 8 times just to make sure that nothing was binding up and that everything was good. And as you can see, also tension on our timing chain is tight now since I've rotated it over. So the next step that we're going to do, we're going to start putting the timing covers back on the bottom, try to get the crank pulley on, and I'm going to start putting the water pump, not water pump, yeah, the water pump pulley, the power steering pump, and the alternator back on. Alright, so as you can see, we do have the engine running. She's running pretty good. I did have to replace the thermostat housing because it was cracked, and when I tightened it down, it broke the whole ear, it broke the whole ear off of that. Got the other part somewhere. There it is. That's the other part of it right there. You can see. Broke it right off. I'm guessing it was cracked before and we didn't notice it, and whenever I tightened it down, it just broke it off. But I went ahead and replaced it under my own money. I ain't gonna bother the customer with that. Like I said, I can't tell if that was my fault or it was already pre-cracked, but the housing was only $20, so I'm not really worried about that. So we do have it running. It is running pretty good. No misfires. I'm just letting it warm up right now just to open up the thermostat. It does have a new thermostat in it. And basically forgot to tighten down that one clamp. I know I'm moving all around. Got to tighten this intake clamp down. And I don't want to put too much force on it because it is already rusted. Right. There she is. She's running good. We're going to get her up to temperature. I'll show y'all there's no check engine light on as well. No check engine lights, no warning lights. Only thing that's on is brake light and airbag, but they knew the airbag light was on. But like I said, we do have it running, and this is pretty much going to conclude the video. If y'all got any questions, comments, concerns, please leave them in the comment section below. And if you would, please hit that like, subscribe, and notification bell. Also, my merch line is below. Anything off that does help the channel, as well as all the views, the likes, and comments, and everything. But until next time, y'all have a great day.